Hi friends, it's Ren here. Hope you're all doing great, guys. I wanted to return to this rumor, or should I say theory, that INFJs have in fact FI, a function that they can tap into. As you know, FI is the dominant function of the INFP and the ISFP. It's a function that is strongly correlated with subjective expression of feeling, and I'm still surprised after so many years of recording videos where I explain that, I try to argue anyway, that 8 functions model are not convincing, they don't work, it's better to stick to a 4 function model. The main reason being that if you completely multiply the variables, you can't have any explanatory power anymore, and you can explain just about anything. Somewhat similar to what you could do with Enneagram, where people talk to, about having, like, being a type 4 with a 5 wing and having a tri-type that's like 4, 6, 9, and sometimes they add wings to their tri-types and they end up having like an element of all the 9 types. It's like you can't explain any of your behavior anymore, because the fewer variables you have, the more powerful your explanatory system is. It's a basic rule in scientific theories, that the fewer variables you have, the more your explanatory power. The more variables you have, basically the more risk you take of having 0 explanatory power, which is equivalent to pseudoscience, which is exactly why you see in horoscopes that basically the variables are so numerous and general that just about anything can apply to just about anything. So you always have to think that 8 function models are very much isomorphic to horoscopes. There's a strong link there, okay? Now, when it comes to INFJs FI, people use the justification that, well, like, everybody has emotions and everybody has subjective emotions. So FI can't be the same as FE. FE can't do the work of expressing subjective emotions. Everybody has that, so even an ENFJ has to have FI, because having subjective states of feeling is an element of everybody's life, and we're not artificial intelligences, at least not yet. So we got to have FI somewhere and access it. And this idea is kind of crazy to me, because at the same time, people who say this, they say, well, we gotta give subjective states of feeling to ENFJs and INFJs and INTPs and so on. But at the same time, they say, well, we have to do this with FI. But at the same time, they have to admit that FI comes, if it is to be there in the life of an INFJ, for example, it has to be lower than the 4 main functions. In other words, it has to be lower than SE. SE is already a massive blind spot for INFJs. So you're saying that the experience and expression of subjective states of feeling, in order to be in the INFJ's life, has to be ranked as lower than FE, basically as dysfunctional, right? It's like it's there, but it's there. We have to put it there because every human has it. But for ENFJs, INFJs, and others, it's basically put at the level in the hierarchy where it has to be dysfunctional, and we know it's not true. INFJs are perfectly functional and have a very rich internal landscape of subjective states of feeling, right? So it can't have to do with FI. And in fact, we know this because FI is part of the JI pair with TI. And what FI does is actually perform an internal deliberation as to selecting how one ought to feel internally about a particular situation. It's not the raw act of feeling. People still confuse the raw act of feeling emotions, which everybody has and is not a cognitive thing. Emotions are not cognitive, right? And we're talking about cognitive functions. So always remember, if you're talking about a cognitive function like FI, you're not talking about emotion, which is not cognitive. When you're talking about a cognitive function, you're already in the domain of the cognitive. You're already in the domain of a form of deliberation that happens somewhere mentally. And FI does this. FI is a function of discriminating between different emotions about which one is the most valid for you. INFJs don't need FI to do that. They have TI. The work that FI does for INFPs and the FIT people of this world is done by TI for INFJs, INTPs, and the other FETI people of this world, which is why those types come across so different. Why the FIT people come across, when they express emotion, much more raw, much more candid, as some systems like to put it, which I think is an excellent term. And you can see it on their face. You can see that they don't like to, in a sense, put some level of control over how they process emotions, whereas the FETI people, those who dominate with FE, just like those who dominate with TI, there are of course differences, but at least in this respect they're similar. They put a heavy level of control over how they process and deliberate about which emotions are the most valid, which is why one of the blind spots of an ENFJ, for example, is never feeling like they're completely in touch with their emotions. They feel like just about anyone else, right? But to be able to be in touch, you need to have a process of judgment, a cognitive process. And ENFJs are so projected outward that sometimes it's hard for them to align between what they're really feeling in there and, you know, the way that they actually articulate it. It's the same for ENTJs, except that you replace TI with FI. So don't underestimate that TI and FI are both functions of introverted deliberation, and they have much more in common than people realize, and they don't have to do with emotion, right? They have to do with the cognitive processing of internal states, including emotional states, but emotions, of course, everybody has them, and no one type is more functional or less functional in that respect, okay? And that applies to INFJs. Now, just in case you don't know this yet, The Ecstatic Soul is my book on the INFJ psyche. Get it, get the reviews, there's the links all below, but it has a sequel now, The Infinite Soul. A man, a woman. And this is taking into account the INFJ psyche explored in The Ecstatic Soul, but looking at how INFJs can lead fulfilling, meaningful, and purposeful lives in the world today. Get the book, the link is below, and don't forget my Patreon page, the link is there. It also massively helps. All right, see you tomorrow, guys. Take care.